My 84-year-old grandma made us promise not to let her die alone after her sister's empty funeral, so we started having weekly family dinners again. Then she began showing up at our jobs with lunch, installing secret cameras in our homes, and following our kids to school. When we found a hidden room in her house with mannequins, dressed in our stolen clothes, having recorded conversations at a fake dinner table, we realized her fear of being forgotten had turned into something much darker. After Aunt Helen's funeral, where only 3 people showed up to say goodbye to a woman who'd lived 82 years, Grandma Ellen gripped my hand so tight her rings left marks. "Promise me," she whispered, staring at that empty chapel. "Promise you won't let that happen to me." At first, her fear made sense. She'd called during Jeopardy commercials to ask about my day. Started baking those lemon squares I mentioned liking once in high school. When she began hosting Sunday dinners again, insisting the whole family come, we were actually grateful. Mom had been worried about her rattling around in that big house alone. The dinners were perfect, her famous pot roast, fresh flowers on the table, photo albums spread across the coffee table afterward. She'd beam when my daughter Maya called her Gigi, recording every word on her phone for when my memory goes. We thought it was sweet how she'd replay Maya's laugh during dessert, but then she started calling during work meetings. "Just wanted to hear your voice, sweetheart. You never know when it might be the last time." When I explained I couldn't always answer, she bought everyone Apple Watches. "For emergencies," she said, syncing them to her phone. The heart rate alerts started immediately. "Your pulse spiked at 247, she'd text. "Everything okay? Thinking of you." Mom tried to address it gently after Grandma showed up at her office with lunch for the 3rd time that week. "The other secretaries are jealous," Grandma laughed, but her eyes were sharp. "They wish their mothers loved them this much." The Sunday dinners became non-negotiable. My cousin Jake missed one for a work trip and came home to find his apartment rearranged. Every family photo had been replaced with pictures of Grandma. She'd left a note: "So you don't forget who loves you most. She has a key for emergencies," he rationalized, but we all exchanged glances. When had she gotten keys to everyone's homes? That's when the memory tests started. She'd quiz us about previous dinners, what we talked about, what people wore, who sat where. My brother David failed to remember a joke from 3 weeks prior, and she wept at the table. "You're already forgetting me and I'm still here." My sister Lisa discovered the recordings during Thanksgiving. She'd been helping in the kitchen when she found a phone hidden behind the flour canister, recording everything. "For the family cookbook," Grandma explained, clutching Lisa's wrist. "I need to preserve everything before it's gone, before I'm gone." The bathroom visits during dinners became orchestrated. She'd follow us, pressing her ear against the door. Mom found tiny cameras in the potpourri baskets. "I need to make sure you're safe," Grandma insisted when confronted. "What if you fall? What if you need me?" She started showing up at the grandkids' schools with forgotten lunches, telling teachers she was their primary caregiver. Maya's teacher called, concerned that Grandma had been volunteering every day, insisting on sitting in the classroom to observe family behavior patterns. The GPS trackers were in everything, sewn into backpack linings, tucked in wallet folds, even baked into cookies she sent home with us. "Eat one whenever you miss me," she'd say. We found out when Jake started beeping during an MRI. Her Facebook posts escalated from sweet to suffocating. Daily photo collages. 384 days of loving my family. Each post tagged us multiple times. Notifications pinging constantly. She'd comment on posts from years ago at 3 a.m. "Remember when you loved spending time with Grandma?" The family meetings she tracked through Find My Friends, showing up coincidentally wherever we gathered without her. The pediatrician called, concerned that Grandma had been requesting copies of the grandkids' medical records. She'd listed herself as their primary emergency contact at their schools. My wife found Grandma in our bedroom at 2 a.m., standing over Maya's bed with scissors, clipping a lock of her hair. "She's growing so fast," she whispered. "I need to remember every stage." The wall in her sewing room had dozens of hair samples, labeled with dates and what we'd eaten that day. Then came the night she called me sobbing at 3 a.m. "I'm dying," she gasped. "Please, I need to see everyone one last time." We rushed over to find her perfectly healthy, fully dressed, with a spread of sandwiches waiting. "I just needed to know you'd come," she said, as if that explained everything. Mom found the guest room by accident, looking for Christmas decorations. The scream she let out brought us all running. The walls were covered in our hair, labeled and dated, arranged in patterns. Baby teeth in shadow boxes, used tissues pressed like flowers under glass. But it was the mannequins that made my skin crawl. They were dressed in clothes stolen from our homes, positioned around a dinner table. Each had recordings of our voices playing from speakers in their chests. "Sunday dinner forever," they said in endless loops. "Love you, Grandma." We called an emergency family meeting the next morning. Everyone showed up except Grandma, who we deliberately didn't invite. The living room felt different without her presence, like we could finally breathe. Mom paced back and forth, wringing her hands. David sat with his head in his hands while Lisa scrolled through her phone, documenting everything. Jake kept checking the windows, paranoid that Grandma might show up. My wife held Maya close, our daughter still confused about why Gigi had been in our room. The discussion started calmly enough. We agreed something had to be done. Mom suggested therapy, maybe medication for anxiety. David thought we should limit visits to once a week. Lisa wanted to change all our locks, but we couldn't agree on the approach. Then Mom's phone rang. Grandma's ringtone, a recording of Maya singing Happy Birthday, filled the room. Mom declined the call. It rang again immediately, and again. Then all our phones started ringing in sequence, a cascade of that same recording echoing through the house. The texts came next. Pictures of us from that morning, taken through our windows. Why wasn't I invited to the family meeting? I saw Jake arrive at 9:47. Lisa brought coffee for everyone but me. Maya's wearing the dress I bought her. My blood ran cold. She'd been watching us all morning. Jake jumped up and ran outside. We heard him yelling. Then he came back pale-faced. She'd installed cameras on the telephone poles, tiny things hidden in fake bird nests. He'd found 3 just on our street. We decided to confront her together. Strength in numbers. But when we arrived at her house, she was ready for us. The dining room was set for Sunday dinner, complete with place cards. She sat at the head of the table, hands folded, wearing her best church dress. She didn't let us speak first. Instead, she pulled out a folder thick with papers, medical articles about elderly abandonment, statistics about forgotten grandparents, printed emails between us discussing her problem, screenshots of text messages where we'd complained about her behavior. Then came the tears. Not dramatic sobs, but silent streams down her cheeks as she showed us a calendar. Every day we'd been too busy for her marked in red, every declined call logged, every excuse cataloged. She'd been building her case for months. Mom crumbled first. The guilt hit her like a physical blow, and suddenly she was apologizing, promising to do better. David followed, then Lisa. Even Jake wavered. I watched our united front dissolve in minutes, but I held firm. This wasn't about neglect. This was about boundaries. When I tried to explain about the mannequins, the recordings, the stalking, Grandma's tears stopped instantly. She looked directly at me with those sharp eyes. "You're trying to turn my family against me," she said quietly, "just like your father did to your mother." The room went silent. Mom's face went white. It was a low blow, bringing up Dad's affair from 20 years ago. But Grandma wasn't done. She pulled out more papers. Every mistake I'd made as a parent documented. The time Maya fell at the playground while I was checking my phone, the parent-teacher conference I'd missed, the birthday party where I'd forgotten the cake. She'd been collecting ammunition. Maybe, she said slowly, Maya would be better off spending more time with someone who truly prioritizes family. The threat hung in the air. My wife's grip on my arm tightened. This wasn't about loneliness anymore. This was about control. We left without resolving anything. The family was split. Mom and David thought we were overreacting. Lisa was on the fence. Only Jake and my wife fully supported me. Grandma had successfully divided us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on Maya, making sure her windows were locked. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from our doorbell camera. Nothing there, but I knew she'd triggered it somehow. A reminder that she was watching. The next few days were psychological warfare. She started calling Maya's school, claiming I'd forgotten to pack lunch, showing up with elaborate meals. She told Maya's teacher she was concerned about our home situation, planting seeds of doubt. She befriended our neighbors, bringing them cookies and casseroles, mentioning how worried she was about us. "They seem so stressed lately," I heard her tell Mrs. De Patterson. "I just hope everything's okay at home." The security system alerts came at all hours. Motion detected at the back door. Front door camera triggered. Always nothing there when I checked, but I knew she was behind it. She was wearing us down. Then she escalated. Lisa called me panicked one afternoon. Grandma had shown up at her job with a box of family photos, telling her coworkers stories about Lisa's childhood, but mixed in were recent photos. Lisa at her desk when she thought she was alone. Lisa in her car at lunch. Lisa through her apartment window. How long has she been following me? I wonder how Grandma Ellen figured out exactly when to push each family member's buttons. She must have been studying them for months to know just what would make Mom crumble first. How did she get cameras on telephone poles without anyone noticing? Lisa's voice shook. She was finally seeing what I'd been trying to tell them. Jake found GPS trackers on all our cars, more sophisticated than the ones in the cookies. These were hardwired into the electrical systems. The mechanic said they'd been there for months, maybe longer. David's breaking point came when his son's daycare called. Grandma had tried to pick him up, claiming to be on the authorized list. She'd had forged paperwork, knew all the security questions. If the director hadn't recognized David's signature was off, she would have succeeded. We met again, this time at Jake's apartment. We swept for bugs first, finding two in the living room alone. The paranoia was exhausting, but necessary. This time, everyone was on the same page. Grandma had crossed too many lines. We agreed on a plan. We'd stage an intervention, present a united front, set clear boundaries with consequences. Mom would take the lead as Grandma's daughter. We practiced what we'd say, trying to balance firmness with compassion. But Grandma was always one step ahead. The intervention never happened. When we arrived at Grandma's house that Sunday, she wasn't alone. My wife's parents sat in the living room, along with 3 neighbors and the pastor from her church. They all wore concerned expressions, hands folded, waiting. Grandma had staged her own intervention. For us, the pastor cleared his throat and explained how Grandma had come to him, worried about our family's spiritual health. The neighbors shared stories of seeing us rush past without greeting anyone, always too busy for community. My in-laws mentioned how rarely we visited them compared to how often Grandma reached out. Mom tried to explain our concerns, but Grandma had coached everyone perfectly. Each time we mentioned surveillance or boundaries, they'd exchange knowing looks. The word paranoid floated unspoken in the air. We'd walked into an ambush disguised as concern. My wife squeezed my hand as her mother suggested we seemed stressed, maybe needed help. The pastor offered counseling services. The neighbors promised to check in more often. Everyone was so helpful, so caring, so completely under Grandma's influence. We left defeated. In the car, Maya asked why everyone was upset with us. I had no good answer. The next phase of Grandma's campaign targeted our weakest points. She volunteered at Maya's school library every day, becoming beloved by staff and students. She brought homemade cookies, helped with reading groups, and shared stories about her family. Maya came home talking about how wonderful Gigi was, how all her friends wished they had a grandmother like her. She joined Mom's book club, David's gym, and Lisa's yoga studio. Everywhere we went, Grandma had already been there, spreading her version of our family story. Poor devoted grandmother, trying so hard to stay connected. Ungrateful children, too busy for family. The narrative wrote itself. Jake discovered she'd been paying for information. The doorman at his building admitted Grandma gave him $50 a week to text her when Jake came and went. The barista at my regular coffee shop had been sending her photos of me during my morning routine. Even the dry cleaner had been bribed to report what clothes we dropped off and when. Her network was vast and growing. Every service person, every acquaintance, every peripheral contact had been recruited into Grandma's surveillance system. We couldn't trust anyone. The breaking point came through Maya's dance recital. We deliberately not told Grandma about it, desperate for one family event without her overwhelming presence. But when we arrived at the auditorium, she sat in the front row, camera ready, wearing a shirt with Maya's picture on it. Maya ran to her, delighted. The other parents smiled at the devoted grandmother. My wife and I looked like the villains times when we tried to explain we'd saved seats elsewhere. Grandma's eyes gleamed with triumph as Maya chose to sit with her. During the performance, I noticed Grandma filming not just Maya, but our reactions. She caught my wife wiping away tears, me checking my phone during a slower number, building her evidence, always building evidence. After the recital, Grandma had arranged a surprise party in the lobby, cake, balloons, and a professional photographer she'd hired. Other families gathered around, charmed by the elaborate celebration. Maya glowed under the attention while we stood awkwardly to the side, painted as the parents who hadn't thought to celebrate their daughter's performance. The photographer, I learned later, was actually a private investigator. Grandma had hired him weeks earlier to document our family's activities. The recital photos were just a bonus. Lisa discovered the extent of the surveillance when she found a thick folder in Grandma's car during a grocery run. Hundreds of photos, detailed logs of our movements, transcripts of overheard conversations, maps with our regular routes highlighted, schedules of our daily patterns. It was the work of months, maybe years, but the most disturbing discovery was the contingency plans, detailed instructions for if something happened to any of us, not emergency contacts or medical information, but plans for how she'd insert herself into our lives. If I died, she'd move in to help with Maya. If my wife died, she'd petition for partial custody. Every scenario ended with Grandma gaining more control. David's wife found the letters hidden in their attic during spring cleaning, dozens of them, addressed to Maya and David's son, dated years in the future. Letters for their 16th birthdays, their graduations, their weddings, all written as if Grandma knew she'd be gone, each one subtly poisoning them against their parents. Your mother never understood the importance of family, one read, but you and I always had something special. The manipulation was masterful. Each letter painted her as the only one who truly loved them, the only one who put them first. She'd even included photos of their parents looking tired, distracted, or annoyed, carefully curated to support her narrative. We tried changing our routines, but she adapted instantly. New gym? She'd already joined. Different grocery store? She'd befriended the manager. We couldn't outmaneuver someone who'd made stalking us her full-time occupation. Jake suggested we all move away, start fresh somewhere she couldn't follow. But we discovered she'd been monitoring our finances too. She knew exactly how much we had saved, what we could afford. Real estate websites we'd browsed showed up in her search history. She'd already researched schools and neighborhoods wherever we might go. The confrontation with Mom's book club showed how deep her influence ran. Mom tried to explain our concerns to her friends, women she'd known for years, but Grandma had gotten there first, sharing stories of our coldness, our neglect. They looked at Mom with pity, suggesting she was being influenced by her ungrateful children. One woman pulled Mom aside afterward, whispering that Grandma had shown them the mannequin room. But in Grandma's version, it was a touching memorial to family dinners, a sweet old woman's way of coping with loneliness. The recordings were her way of preserving precious memories. The hair samples, keepsakes of her beloved grandchildren's growth. Everything twisted, every disturbing behavior reframed as love. My wife started documenting everything, building our own evidence file. But Grandma must have sensed it. Things began disappearing from our house. The notebook where my wife recorded incidents, the flash drive with photos of the GPS trackers, even our copy of the police report we'd filed about the break-in vanished. She was in our house, regularly. Despite changing locks, installing new security, she found ways in. A window left unlocked, a spare key we didn't know existed. The security company admitted she'd called pretending to be my wife, getting our access codes. The school situation escalated when Grandma convinced Maya's teacher she should be the emergency contact. She'd presented forged documents showing she had medical power of attorney. When we protested, she produced recordings of us saying we trusted her with our children's lives. Conversations taken out of context, edited to support her claims. Maya began coming home with stories. Gigi said we were too busy for her. Gigi said we didn't appreciate family. Gigi said she was the only one who would always have time for her. The poison dripped slowly but steadily into our daughter's mind. David caught Grandma following his son's school bus, documenting every stop. She'd mapped out which children got off where, their parents' schedules, their after-school activities. When confronted, she claimed she was ensuring the bus driver was safe, protecting her grandson. The family dinners continued, now thick with tension. Grandma would serve elaborate meals while making subtle digs. She'd reminisce about when we were young and loved spending time with her. She'd mention how other grandmothers barely saw their grandchildren, how lucky she was we still came. But the tests grew more intense. Pop quizzes about family history, demands to recite phone numbers from memory, punishment disguised as disappointment when we failed. Lisa once forgot the name of Grandma's childhood dog and spent the rest of dinner being reminded of every other thing she'd forgotten over the years. Jake's girlfriend broke up with him after Grandma befriended her, slowly poisoning the relationship. She'd shared embarrassing childhood stories, mentioned his commitment issues, wondered aloud if he'd inherited his father's wandering eye. By the time Jake realized what was happening, the damage was done. We discovered she'd been recording our therapy sessions. The therapist's office had a vent that connected to the building's maintenance room. Grandma had befriended the janitor, gaining access to listen and record everything we said. This whole situation with Grandma Ellen feels so suffocating for this family. She's literally everywhere they turn, from Maya's school to their gym to their coffee shop. The way she turned their own intervention into an ambush with the pastor and neighbors was really hard to watch. Our most private thoughts, our strategies for dealing with her, all in her hands. She used the information surgically. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed at work, she started calling my boss, pretending to be concerned about my mental health. When my wife discussed her postpartum anxiety from years ago, Grandma began questioning her fitness as a mother to anyone who'd listen. The birthday party ambush was perfectly orchestrated. We'd planned a small celebration for Maya at a park, telling her it was a surprise to keep her from mentioning it to Gigi. But when we arrived, Grandma had rented the entire park, hired entertainers, invited Maya's whole class. Our simple party looked pathetic in comparison. Maya was thrilled, running to hug Grandma while barely acknowledging our presence. The other parents praised Grandma's devotion. We stood there, holding our small cake and feeling like failures. years. Grandma had won again. Mom's breakdown came after she found her childhood diary in Grandma's possession. Pages had been copied and distributed to the family with commentary. Teenage complaints about her mother annotated with Grandma's hurt responses. Private thoughts weaponized decades later. The security footage from our home showed the full extent of her visits. She'd come while we were at work, spending hours in Maya's room, sitting on her bed, going through her drawings, reading her diary, sometimes just standing there, staring at where Maya slept. She'd installed her own cameras too, tiny things we kept finding and removing, only for new ones to appear. In the air vents, behind picture frames, inside toys. We lived in a surveillance state run by an 84-year-old woman. Lisa's wedding planning became a battlefield. Grandma had opinions on everything, backed by threats. If her choice of flowers wasn't selected, maybe she'd be too ill to attend. If her guest list additions were refused, perhaps she'd forget to contribute the money she'd promised. Every decision held hostage, but it was the discovery in the basement that changed everything. Jake had gone down to check the water heater and found a hidden room. Grandma had been preparing it for years. A fully stocked apartment with everything she'd need to move in. Medical equipment still in boxes, legal documents granting her various powers, plans for renovating our homes to accommodate her. She wasn't planning to be forgotten. She was planning to be inescapable. The documents were the most chilling part. Drafts of letters to lawyers about seeking custody of grandchildren due to parental neglect. Medical forms claiming we were preventing her from seeing doctors, setting up a potential elder abuse case. Financial records showing suspicious transfers that could be interpreted as theft. All dated but unsigned, ready to be deployed when needed. We realized then that this wasn't just about control or loneliness. Grandma was preparing for war, and she'd been strategizing far longer than we'd known. Every piece of evidence we thought we had against her, she had a counter-narrative prepared. Every boundary we tried to set, she had a way around it. The family meeting that night was different. We sat in Jake's apartment, curtains drawn, phones in a metal box to block signals. We'd swept for bugs 3 times. Mom looked hollow, David angry, Lisa scared. Jake kept checking the locks. My wife held my hand so tight it hurt. We finally understood we weren't dealing with a lonely grandmother afraid of being forgotten. We were dealing with someone who would destroy our lives rather than accept any distance. Someone who saw love as possession and family as property. The question was no longer how to set boundaries or find balance. The question was how to protect ourselves and our children from someone who claimed to love us more than anything in the world. Outside, a car engine idled. We all recognized the sound. Grandma's old Buick, parked where she could watch Jake's windows. Waiting. Always waiting. Planning her next move in a game where only she knew all the rules. The next morning, I woke to find my wife already up, staring at her laptop screen. She'd been researching all night. Dark circles under her eyes. She showed me what she'd found. Forums for families dealing with controlling elderly relatives, support groups, legal advice. None of it seemed to fit our situation exactly. Grandma had weaponized love itself. Maya came downstairs asking if we were visiting Gigi today. The hope in her voice twisted my stomach. My wife and I exchanged looks. We'd been so focused on protecting her from Grandma's manipulation that we hadn't considered how Maya would process any changes. Jake called while we were having breakfast. He'd spent the night in his car after finding another camera in his bedroom. The paranoia was destroying us from the inside, exactly as Grandma intended. He mentioned seeing her Buick circling his block 3 times before dawn. Mom arrived unannounced, looking haggard. She'd found more evidence in Grandma's house during her weekly visit. Financial documents suggesting Grandma had been slowly transferring family assets into accounts we couldn't access. Property deeds with addendums. Insurance policies with changed beneficiaries. The groundwork for financial control spanning years. David's wife called next. Their son had started having nightmares about Gigi taking him away. He'd overheard adult conversations, picked up on the tension. Now he was afraid of his great-grandmother, clinging to his parents whenever her name was mentioned. The damage was spreading to the next generation. We decided to meet at a neutral location, a diner 2 towns over where Grandma wouldn't think to look. The 6 of us huddled in a back booth, speaking in hushed tones like criminals planning a heist. The irony wasn't lost on me. We were hiding from an 84-year-old woman. Lisa had contacted a family therapist who specialized in elder care issues. The therapist had been horrified by our situation, but admitted she'd never encountered anything quite like it. Her advice was practical but daunting. Document everything, set firm boundaries, prepare for escalation. The documentation was already extensive. My wife had photographed every tracker, recorded every unauthorized entry, cataloged every manipulation. Jake had kept the surveillance equipment as evidence. David had the forged documents. Mom had copies of the financial irregularities. We had proof of everything except a way forward. That afternoon, we returned to find Grandma's car in my driveway. She sat on our porch swing, Maya on her lap, reading a story. The picture of grandmother-granddaughter bliss. Maya jumped up when she saw us, running over excitedly to tell us about the surprise visit from Gigi. Grandma smiled serenely, mentioning she'd used her key when no one answered. She'd brought Maya's favorite cookies and a new dress. Just a loving grandmother spending time with her great-granddaughter. Nothing wrong with that, her expression challenged. My wife took Maya inside while I faced Grandma. I tried explaining our concerns calmly, rationally. She listened with that same serene smile, occasionally patting my hand like I was a confused child. When I finished, she simply stood and walked to her car, pausing only to blow Maya a kiss through the window. The escalation came within hours. Maya's school called. Grandma had arrived claiming there was a family emergency, trying to pick her up early. When they'd refused without parental permission, she'd become agitated, accusing them of keeping her from her family. Security had to escort her out. Child Protective Services showed up that evening. Someone had made an anonymous report about possible neglect and endangerment. They found a clean house, well-fed child, attentive parents. The social worker seemed embarrassed by the clearly false report, but had to follow protocol. We knew who'd called. Jake discovered his credit cards had been canceled. The bank claimed suspicious activity, but when he investigated, he found Grandma listed as an authorized user on accounts he'd never never shared with her. She'd been monitoring his spending for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. David's employer received concerned calls about his mental state and family situation. HR pulled him aside for a wellness check. His wife's yoga studio suddenly had issues with their lease. The landlord, it turned out, was Grandma's bridge partner. Lisa's wedding venue called with regrets. There'd been a double booking, terribly sorry. Every other venue in town was mysteriously booked for her date. Vendors began canceling. The florist had a family emergency. The caterer developed health code violations. One by one, her plans crumbled. We met again that night, this time in Mom's basement. We'd checked for bugs twice. The weight of Grandma's campaign pressed down on us. She was systematically destroying our lives, all while maintaining the facade of a loving grandmother. Mom finally broke down, admitting something she'd hidden for years. This wasn't the first time. When she was young, Grandma had done similar things to Mom's father, isolated him from his family, monitored his every move until he'd had enough and left. Mom had been told he abandoned them, but now she wondered if he'd simply escaped. The revelation shifted everything. This wasn't about age or loneliness or fear of being forgotten. This was a pattern spanning decades. We weren't her first victims, just her current ones. The mannequins in her guest room took on new meaning. How many families had she tried to preserve in her twisted way? Jake suggested we confront her together, force her to acknowledge what she was doing. But we'd tried that. She had an answer for everything, a justification for every violation. In her mind, she was the victim of ungrateful children who didn't appreciate her love. David wanted to involve lawyers, get restraining orders, but Grandma had been preparing for that too. What makes someone prepare a secret apartment in their own family's basement? The level of planning here, medical equipment, legal papers, renovation plans. It's like she was building her own invasion strategy for years without anyone knowing. Those documents in her basement weren't just plans. They were evidence she'd manufactured against us. Years of twisted context, edited recordings, financial entanglements we didn't even know existed. My wife proposed the nuclear option. Complete cutoff. Change our numbers, move without forwarding addresses, start fresh. But the practicalities were staggering. Jobs, schools, mortgages. Our lives were rooted here, and Grandma had shown she could find us anywhere. Lisa had been quiet through the discussion. Finally, she spoke up with an idea that made us all pause. We'd been playing defense, reacting to Grandma's moves. What if we went on offense? Not to hurt her, but to redirect her focus. The plan was simple, but requiring careful execution. We'd give Grandma what she wanted: attention, involvement, control, but on our terms. Scheduled visits with strict time limits, supervised interactions with the children, regular phone calls at predetermined times. We'd feed her need for connection while protecting ourselves. More importantly, we'd found Grandma's weakness: public perception. She needed to be seen as the perfect grandmother. We'd use that. Every interaction would be in public spaces. Every visit would include outside witnesses. She couldn't maintain her manipulations under scrutiny. The implementation began immediately. I called Grandma, suggesting weekly lunches at her favorite restaurant. She was suspicious, but agreed. Mom proposed shopping trips with strict start and end times. David offered to help with yard work on Saturday mornings only. The first few attempts were rocky. Grandma pushed boundaries, tried to extend visits, made emotional appeals, but we held firm. When she showed up outside scheduled times, we didn't answer. When she called repeatedly, we let it go to voicemail. Slowly, painfully, we began establishing patterns she had to follow. Maya struggled with the changes. She didn't understand why Gigi couldn't visit whenever she wanted anymore. We explained in simple terms about schedules and boundaries, avoiding the darker truths. Children adapt, and gradually she accepted the new normal. Grandma fought back, of course. The manipulations continued but lost their effectiveness. When she told Maya's teacher we were limiting her grandmother time, we calmly explained our structured visitation schedule. When she claimed elder abuse to her church friends, we invited them to witness our public interactions. The surveillance equipment disappeared one by one. Jake removed the cameras, changed his locks, installed a security system Grandma couldn't hack. We all followed suit. The trackers were found and discarded. The financial entanglements were slowly unwound with help from lawyers who specialized in elder financial abuse. Truly grateful we got to share this journey today. Thanks for letting me be part of it with you. Like the video. It helps more than you think.